Resident Evil.
Joseph!
It's in your blood.
The award-winning must-have action title of 2005 is now a PlayStation.
Be careful. They'll be looking for you.
Resident Evil is a franchise that has been with me since I was a teenager. My first memory of it was my friend recommending me to play Resident Evil 4. I was in secondary school at that time and I was a big fan of scary games. The games which kept me on edge at that time were games like Prince of Persia: Warrior Within. In it you have this time monster called the Dahaka and it chases you around. These sequences alone made my hands shake and made me sweat. So hearing about chainsaw people, hordes of enemies and grotesque monsters didn't exactly give me the resolve to play such a game. However, at that time I was looking into expanding the types of games I played, and so with a mix of hesitation and excitement I bought a PlayStation 2 version of Resident Evil 4. And well, I'm glad I did. It opened my mind up to a whole new genre of games, B-movie tropes and action at its best. From then, I made it my mission to play most of the Resident Evil games, tracking them down on eBay or second-hand shops. If I were to give a series review excluding Resident Evil Village, then I would say that the original games of the PlayStation were the best the console had to offer, kickstarting survival horror in the mainstream. Out of the original three, I would say Resident Evil 2 is my favourite, and Resident Evil 4 is the series at its peak. And the subsequent games after, namely Resident Evil 6, devolve into mindless action and are miles away from its horror roots. Tank chase? Check. Zombie T-Rex? Check. 30-hour campaign of just shooting mindlessly without any regard to ammo conservation? Check. I mean, there is more than just this, but I'll just stop. Honestly though, after Resident Evil 6 I didn't think the franchise would recover. That is until Resident Evil 7 was unveiled. Not only did it change up the formula like 4 did, changing it from a third-person perspective over to a first-person one, it introduced nemesis-like enemies that chased the main character Ethan Winters down various locations. Enemies were few but hit hard. New mechanics like blocking were introduced, and some old-school mechanics like the inventory box and limited item management were added. The story for the most part seemed self-contained and wasn't as world-ending as was Resident Evil 5 and 6. And the main focus was on horror, so yes, ammo conservation was key. Yeah, there were problems with enemy variety, Ethan Winters' dumb reaction to everything.
Who builds this shit? Poor deputy. That's not groovy. Do me a favor and stay dead. I just got done dealing with your mom and her fucking bugs. Wish you could have warned me. What the fuck? Well, that's special. Just fucking stay dead, okay? Now where the hell are you? Fuck you! Sorry, buddy. Ah. Oh my god. Let me talk to Mia. Fuck! Fuck you too. Kiss my ass. What the fuck? What is that? What is that? Okay, you little bitch. Where the fuck are you? Fuck!
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Overall, however, it was a breath of fresh air. The RE engine, the engine used to create the game, was used on remakes for Resident Evil 2, again one of my favourites, and on Resident Evil 3 remake, and on Devil May Cry 5, which in my opinion is one of the best action games on the last generation of consoles. It's crazy to imagine that this one game helped Capcom find its legs, especially after the disaster that was Resident Evil 6. It's safe to say that as of writing this script and editing this video, we are in a resurgence of horror games, especially those from Capcom. And now we come to the 8th mainline installment, Resident Evil Village. So this is part 2 of my videos about Resident Evil Village. In the first part I explained the story of Resident Evil Village and kind of went into like the plot points. If you are interested in that, then you can check here or access the link in the description box below. Half a year before the release of Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, development on Village had started. According to game director Morimasa Sato. We were still busy developing Resident Evil 7, but my boss told me to start planning for the next entry in the series. At that time, we had no idea of how users would react towards the new horror experience and characters of 7 yet. So, with a bit of trepidation, early development on Village had started. The team solidified their own ideas once the favourable reviews of RE7 came through. The team decided on a few things. The main protagonist of RE7, Ethan Winters, will return and his story will continue. In this latest installment, the team would portray him as a father, a person older and wiser about the potential dangers out there. With this also came the decision to keep the first-person perspective as established by his predecessor, as they wanted to push the boundaries of delivering true horror experience. While planning the game, Sato had the idea of making the village the game's main location. He wanted the village to be a second lead character by showing the beauty and horror of the world and contrasting it to other areas of the game like the illustrious and decadent castle. This decision was inspired by Resident Evil 4. Now, for those not in the know, Resident Evil 4 was a genre-defying game. It helped evolve both third-person shooter games as well as survival horror by introducing a more action-oriented game with its more precise shooting mechanics, but still had the tension of past games. The game also started in a village. However, this game led the franchise to a more action-oriented path, which over time led to the franchise dropping its horror roots, culminating with Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 7 in a way was to bring back the horror. The team had an idea to make a game more action-oriented, but mixed with the horror and scares the team had cultivated with Resident Evil 7. Sato explains, "In the history of the series, I believe that Resident Evil 4 is where the action and combat evolved the most. Interestingly, Resident Evil 4 was also set in a village. For Resident Evil Village, we bring the essence of Resident Evil 4, while Resident Evil 7 functions as a base for the game. It's not a reboot of Resident Evil 4, but an offspring of both Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 4. In other words, 4 plus 7 equals 8. The problem here is how do you balance two styles of games, which are tonally different? The answer was two key phrases, a theme park of horror and the ultimate survival horror. By theme park of horror, they meant to add more open and expansive world, linear enough to keep a balanced pace, but open enough to let the players explore the world of Resident Evil Village. And just like theme parks, players will experience moments of high anticipation and fear, followed by a payoff of high-stakes scenarios and action-packed fun. With this, they also had to create villains which would not only challenge the player, but will also have their own unique personalities, motivations, and designs. Each villain would explore a different type of horror, and just like you have different rides in a theme park, each area would be designed around the main villain and would vary up the pacing of the game. By ultimate survival horror, they gave the player ways to overcome the various horrors thrown at them. The player can kick away enemies and counterattack, use barricades, hunt animals, and cook food to become stronger, and use various items to craft and upgrade weapons. This would give the player the feeling that while they are struggling to survive in the beginning of the game, over time they would grow stronger and become more confident in their skills and in their environment. With their ideas locked in, the team would develop the game over the next few years. As with any game development, the team hit a few bumps along the way, and during the pandemic, trouble started to crop up when they were playtesting the game. Playtesters had a negative reaction to the combat portion of the game, with many complaining on the multitude of aggressive enemies and short ammo supply. And while this should make a scary game, quality assurance testers argued it made the game more boring, especially if you had no way to fight back. The team took the info and made a few changes. They reduced the amount of enemies and placed them in specific areas that would invoke paranoia. They made encounters less common, but when it did happen, the enemies were aggressive. They also added more ammo in the beginning to give players a better fighting chance. These changes, once they were implemented, it made a more balanced survival horror experience. Resident Evil Village was announced on June 14th, 2020 at the E3 press conference, and was released the following year on May 7th, 2021. There are a few videos I would recommend about the development of Resident Evil Village. Some of them go through motion capture while others are more developer focused. They will be in the description box below. So the gameplay you are seeing was taken from a PlayStation 4. I don't have a PlayStation 5, so I can't say how good the game looks on that. However, what I can say is that on the PS4, it is steps above and beyond of what I thought was possible. Not only is it a step higher than Resident Evil 7, the game boasts various locations, all beautiful and horrifying at the same time. While there might be some muddy textures here and there, overall the game looks great, and apart from the initial loading screen, you don't tend to have other load times. I say tend to because if you do run from one end of the map to the other, the game does blank out for a second as it loads the assets in. This I can't exactly blame on the game, as the system it's playing on is pretty old. When it comes to gameplay, the game has also taken a step up. Ethan has become wiser. Not only can he block like he did before, but he can counterattack monsters, pushing them and creating distance, and can shoot from the hip while blocking. In anticipation to the release of Resident Evil Village, I played RE7, so certain changes like his faster aim and pace were welcome, not only in terms of gameplay, but also for Ethan as a character. Certain subtle changes in gameplay show his personal growth, such as his tactical reloading and his mastery over crafting various things like mines, pipe bombs and ammo. He can use barricades and shoot flower bags to blind his enemies. He is more battle-wise, his handling over guns is better, and he reloads faster than he did previously. Ethan can also hunt various animals around the village and procure food recipes. The Duke, a merchant-like character, has been reintroduced into the series. Unlike the one seen in Resident Evil 4, this merchant is more involved in the story, and in terms of gameplay he helps Ethan upgrade weapons, buy ammo, craft new recipes, as well as cook food for Ethan, using the various meats and recipes Ethan has acquired. These dishes help upgrade various stats of Ethan, making him stronger as the gameplay progresses. The Duke also buys various treasures taken from dead enemies or scattered throughout the game. You can combine treasures to make them of a greater value and sell them. The main currency is lei, which also happens to be the currency of Romania. You also have puzzles scattered throughout the game. They aren't exactly hard, but good nonetheless, especially the ball ones, which are unique in each location. The game utilizes a Tetris-style inventory management system. It's limited in the beginning, but you can upgrade it with the merchant as the game progresses. It's one of the many ideas inherited from Resident Evil 4. As you explore the game, more areas of the village open up. A few of these are optional, having unique treasures, while others have mini-bosses. Some of these areas can only be accessed if you have certain items like the crank, while others open up as you progress through the game. In terms of location, you have the village, which acts like a hub for the game. Other areas are Castle Dimitrescu, House Beneviento, Moreau's Reservoir, the Stronghold, and Heisenberg's Factory. Each location is unique, and some areas like Castle Dimitrescu and Heisenberg's Factory have specific enemies, while House Beneviento and the old fishing village are more based around the main boss of that area. The village itself is the biggest area. There are few houses to explore and stories to learn via collectibles and documents. Now, the stories themselves aren't mandatory, but do add detail to the overall world, and give an insight to the cultish practices as well as the mindset on some of the villagers. There are a few environmental cues helping us the player to understand what was going on. You can see signs of struggle, a dead horse, and run-down houses, a hint of the Lycan attack. We also find stacks of garlic hanging on the doors, giving us an insight of the dread the villagers have to the vampiric neighbours, the ladies of Castle Dimitrescu. The village itself, while it does have tractors, it doesn't really have any of the modern technologies of the 21st century. This, alongside the various mountains that surround it, cuts it off from the outside world. As you progress through the game and Ethan's objectives become clear, the snow lessens, taking away the mist and showing the true beauty of the village. The main enemies here are the aggressive Lycans, which pop up from time to time. There are a few variants of them, and like wolves, they hunt in packs. They can stalk Ethan from rooftops, bite, use axes and bows, giving them an extra dimension to the gameplay. Adding to this, there are the more aggressive Varkolags, which require a ton of health items as well as ammo. Trust me, you don't want to go into this battle empty-handed. Castle Dimitrescu is probably the second or third biggest area of the game. It gives many similar vibes to the castle portion of Resident Evil 4. It is beautifully realized, yet has the veneer of sinister ongoings. It is here where Ethan is chased by Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters.
I won't last until dinner.
It was cold, wasn't it?
I guess I should hold back a little.
Because this happens early on, it gives you this sense of entrapment, as Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters aren't exactly vulnerable to gun damage, and pack a punch if they ever catch you. The main fodder enemy here, the Moroika, are a welcome change to the more aggressive Lycans of the game and help the player get used to handling Ethan. The Moroika are your more typical zombie style enemies. They are slow, however they can wield certain objects like swords, and they pop up from all sorts of crevices, keeping the player paranoid of what's coming next. There's also a flying variant which adds to the whole Dracula theme, and the mini boss fights with the daughters are pretty simple as they require the player to look for environmental cues that could exploit the weakness of cold wind. There are 3 daughters to get through and each one requires a different way to weaken.
You will not get away! You're my prey!
Crazy witch.
The fight related to Dimitrescu is much more bombastic. The boss fight itself reminded me of a crossbreed between a Bloodborne boss fight and the fabled fight between St. George and the Dragon. It's a pretty entertaining fight, where the player has to fight the monster form of Lady Dimitrescu up close and far away, utilizing the sniper rifle and other weapons like the shotgun and handgun. The fight starts from the roof and ends with Lady Dimitrescu dying at the very bottom.
You'll never see your rose again! Succumb to your curse, you!
You're the one who's cursed.
The next area is House Beneviento. Now this level took me back to what was being done in Resident Evil 7. A mysterious house which seems empty at first, but as you progress and after a slow build, it ends on a terrifying note. Ethan can't use his weapons here, so it's less of an action-packed level but more of a puzzle level, followed by a chase by a demonic fetus which can one-shot Ethan. This is easily the most terrifying part of the game, not being able to use any guns and being followed by something which is an amalgamation of Ethan's insecurities. It brings out this tension that I honestly haven't felt in a long time. After it had finished, all I remember was the sound of my deep breaths. When you escape the demonic fetus, you finally fight the main boss of the area, the doll Angie. Now this fight is an actual inverse of what just happened with the demonic fetus thing. This time though, you are seeking. It's a pretty simple fight. You find the doll 3 times and stab it, beating Donna. However, if you can't find her on time, the other dolls gang up on Ethan and kill him.
It's over.
The next level is the reservoir, which is controlled by Salvatore Moreau. This area is pretty distinct due to its many green hues. The main level itself is a chase by a mutated Moreau in a flooded fishing village. He tries to grab you as you make your way from platform to platform. Now this isn't as terrifying as the previous one, but it's more akin to an action film. There are a few timed platforms which fall, and this mixes up the gameplay. Moreau's boss fight occurs once you open up the reservoir, leveling the playing field. There are green walls which crop up, blocking your way and entrapping you, however these can be shot. Explosive barrels are scattered throughout the level which can be shot to stun him. The real Moreau is hidden inside his fish body, but you can still damage his outer one. You can also plant mines and also use the newly acquired grenade launcher on him. Once enough damage is done, it causes his more decrepit form to pop out for extra damage. He has this one acid attack which will kill Ethan, however if you seek refuge under the shelters, you should be fine. The next part is the stronghold. Now this is where the game goes into its more action horror roots. You basically go here for pest control, killing as many Lycans as you want. You invade the place and start to verse all the various types of Lycans. You can utilize the zipline and red barrels to fight the hordes of Lycans that come after you. As you travel through the level, you also get some insight on how the Lycans work. Finally, you meet Uriash. He's a simple boss fight, but can do devastating damage and can throw pillars at you. Normal Lycans can also attack during this battle, but they are also subject to damage if they are caught by one of his hits.
Eat shit.
The other optional bosses act very similar to Uriash and the Varkalax. the only difference being at the more superficial changes such as the weapons or the outlook. Now after the stronghold, the next level is Heisenberg's factory. Going there means you can't go back to the village. The village stops being a hub and the game becomes more linear to accommodate the story. Heisenberg's factory is a level which follows a tradition in the Resident Evil franchise. Now normally in many of the Resident Evil games, the last level revolves around laboratories and exposition, and you find many odd creatures and failed experiments. Heisenberg's factory is no exception. The design of this level is similar to that of an industrial factory. However, it's cranking out monsters which are a mix of metal and flesh. These are known as the Soldat, and they look like mini tyrants from earlier Resident Evil games. They even have a similar weak spot on the left side of their chest. The thing is, the Soldat themselves know this weakness and so cover up that area. However, you get a few shots in just before they start to attack you. Of the Soldat, there are a few different variants. You have your simple one-armed drilled enemy, your two-armed one, the annoying flying one, and the fully armoured one. The last one has its weak spot fully covered, so you need to use a bomb to expose it. These different variants help mix up the gameplay as well as give you something different from your average Lycan. There is a boss fight with Strum, a soldat with a propeller attached to his body. His boss fight requires the player to shoot his one weak spot behind his back. Strum runs at you at high speeds and tends to heat up. When he does so, he can spew fire at you. The one thing I do like about this boss is how it starts and ends. It starts in a small corridor, however, because he can destroy walls, you end the battle with a wide open area, taking this battle to a more claustrophobic place to a more wide open area. The other boss is Heisenberg himself.
You're like a goddamn cockroach. You think you can take me on? Fine. This'll be my warm-up before I kill that bitch. Let's second this. Man. Your corpse will be another addition to my army.
Just like Lady Dimitrescu and Moreau, he has a more of a monster form that you fight. This is where the game leaves any semblance of its survival horror roots and goes straight balls to the wall action. You fight him with a customized tank made by Chris Redfield with an attached chainsaw. I liked how this chainsaw was a callback to the Jack fight in Resident Evil 7. Halfway through this fight, you lose the tank and it becomes a David vs Goliath type of fight.
It's hopeless. Right? Just give up. Flesh and blood will never win against me! This isn't David and Goliath. It's Ethan!
Chris's section was a good addition to the game. It really shows the difference between someone like Ethan to a Resident Evil veteran like Chris, and his counter-attacks include punches, so it's very Chris accurate. Not only does he kill with better weapons, he kills Valkylax like it's nothing.
Large mutated bioweapon sighted.
The bomb may be releasing infectious particulates. Keep your masks on.
You start in the village and make your way underground and eventually find a lab. This is where you get the most amount of exposition in the game. The only boss fight here is Urias Strager, the older brother to Urias. He's similar to his brother, but he has an armor and a spiked hammer. You can beat him with the overpowered weapons and you can paint him and drop artillery on him to end the fight quicker.
I'm over here, boss.
Good. I'll signal with the locator.
Give a guy a break.
Nice. Thought so.
Reloading now. Just a minute. Okay, Captain. I'm reloading. Ready when you are.
Now, please do not worry the little Rose. I assure you I'll provide her with true peace.
Now to the last boss, Mother Miranda herself. She has various forms. Her basic form does short-range swipes, while her long-range form is her flying around and shooting you with explosive orbs. You could destroy these orbs, as well as hide behind certain objects that spawn from time to time. Her last form is the spider form and she tends to jump at you. She can darken the whole room and starts to attack you, so running here like a crazy person is key. You can see her outline just before she's about to attack you, so you can dodge her and deal some damage. She can be very aggressive and does take up a lot of bullets, but ammo does spawn around the area. After completing the game, you unlock Mercenaries mode. Now, this mode was introduced in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis and also in Resident Evil 4. The main objective in those games was to kill as many enemies as possible before the time ran out. Village changes things up a bit by giving you limited enemies. There are various stages and each one with different enemies, and the main objective here is to kill all the enemies in the shortest amount of time. You can pick up various perks such as quick reload or larger magazine as you progress the stage. And what type of perk you get is kind of random, so each playthrough is unique. You are scored on your playthrough, and in between stages you can upgrade and buy new weapons and ammo to make you an unstoppable machine. This mode is pretty fun, and although I haven't beaten all the stages, it does have a steady incline in difficulty, especially if you want to get the highest score, so it does have replay value. You also unlock a point system. Getting achievements and trophies will help unlock more points, and you can use these points to unlock various things such as making of videos, artwork, guns, and model designs. This is something I personally like. Many games don't do this anymore, so having an extra incentive to play the game again and getting new guns or learning new stuff about development is great. Now overall, I like the gameplay and the setting of Resident Evil Village. It was well rounded and did well to add the already good mechanics of the previous game. Unlike before, it gave a variety of enemies and bosses and made each encounters fun. The environments were diverse, with each one being linked to a house lord and giving me that idea of the many faces of horror. However, I do have some issues with gameplay and settings. When it comes to the setting, the village hub area could have been bigger. I think by adding a few extra areas with stories of the villagers scattered throughout would have demonstrated a more lived-in world. Don't get me wrong, you do get some, but I think more could have been done. There are a high amount of Lycans who were once villagers, but the village itself doesn't seem that big enough to believe this many villagers once lived here. Now, I'm not asking for a large open world village, just a few more roads and houses. Houses that have become dilapidated over the past few years as people started to disappear. Once you complete the game, you can see panels during the credits section on how the Lycans slowly came to be. It wasn't a fast process, so seeing various documents or stories around how people started to disappear and how Lycans came to be would have added to the lore. I'm guessing that the flooded fishing village would have been the answer to this, as it's a whole new place. However, we barely visit it. Most of it is underwater, and when we do get to see a part of it, it's very small. In addition to this, certain characters we see in the beginning of the game are gone quick. It would have been nice to get to know more of the villagers and understand their perspective. If you look at the original announcement trailer, you can see more scenes of Elena, Leonardo and Luisa. In Resident Evil 4, most of, if not all the villagers are infected with the last plaguers, so we don't get to see before what happened. However, in Village, we do get to see a few non-infected people, so seeing some surviving villagers throughout the game would have been nice. There was even a baby in the arms of one of the villagers in the announcement trailer. Would that have been Rose? The religious aspect of the game was underused. Various info you find throughout the game points to the fact that this religion acted more like a cult. Diving into this could have fleshed out the villagers and answered some interesting questions, including their perspective on Mother Miranda and what she told them on the nature of the Lycans. It would have made for some good dialogue between an outsider like Ethan and a cult follower. Other settings I had problems with was with Moreau's area. In a nutshell, it was way too short. Exploring that level would have given some opportunity to learn some new lore and new enemies. Since Moreau is a fish-like creature, a level full of Lovecraftian creatures would have been great, spicing up the enemy variety and introducing new enemy attack patterns. When it came to other mechanics, I did have certain gripes. One of the hallmarks of survival horror for me was item management, and while the inventory system in this game is good, it could have been better. In Resident Evil 4, it felt like I had almost filled up my case, adding to the extra pressure to the gameplay on what to drop and what to keep. In contrast, the case in Village seems like a little bit of a downgrade. It's not as well functioning as the one in Resident Evil 4, and I never really felt my case had filled up. Sure, I can just stop upgrading my case, but in Resident Evil 4, the upgrade would generally appear when I needed it. Yeah, I know this is a bit of a nitpick, but I wish it was just a little bit better. Over in the castle, I didn't like the Nemesis chase parts. Not that I didn't like Lady Dimitrescu chasing Ethan, but she was pretty slow. Her attack patterns were overly telegraphed, and in comparison, you had enemies from previous Resident Evil games like Mr. X or Jack who would chase the player pretty mercilessly.
My little girl has given us a gift. As you can see, the family is only part of her gift. Which in a word means you're fucked.
I didn't get that same exact type of tension from Lady Dimitrescu. While I did feel some tension from her daughters at first, over time it became obvious to the extent they would chase you.
It was cold. Let's wrap things up quickly.
In the game, you could also shoot windows, introducing cold air into the environment. These are also in areas where you don't really see any daughters. You have a bunch of windows throughout the castle that can be broken, and there is even a trophy for breaking all the windows. However, the daughters don't really come to these areas, so what's the point? From what I read, there was an idea to have many more daughters in the beginning, but due to balancing issues, the idea was scrapped. I'm guessing these breakable windows was a remnant of that idea, and these daughters were less mini-bosses and more your standard enemies, weakening them in specific areas and then killing them off. However, I do think it would have been nice for Ethan to chase away the daughters by breaking these windows and eventually cornering them in the areas you do fight them in. The daughters aren't that visually different, and I often forget who is who. We don't interact with them that often, so their personalities aren't that well explored. The one time when we do interact with them is when either you're trying to kill them or they are trying to kill you. The doll fight with Angie is over pretty quick and is overly simple. To me, it seemed like they could have added something more to the whole hallucination power that Donna had. The mini-bosses themselves seem to be a copy of either the Varkolak or Uriash. Fighting an optional boss who was totally unique and had a much different attack pattern and design would have been better rather than adding in previous bosses with a change of paint. Overall, while I thought the idea of a theme park of horror fit well, certain stages such as the Stronghold felt out of place. It was full of action, while the game for the most part doesn't have that much, except the beginning part and Chris's section. Also, why would Heisenberg leave his flask at the Stronghold? Sounds odd to me. Speaking of him, while I did enjoy his boss fight, it would have been nice to have a boss battle in which we fought him in human form. You see throughout the game how interesting his powers of magnetism are, so fighting him in a situation where your guns can't harm him would have been interesting, and from here you could have naturally went on to his big monster form. Now, overall, Ethan is a better character than he was from Resident Evil 7. I have already explained some of his nuances that showcases his growth. These changes made sense in a story perspective as it demonstrates his growth, but also from a mechanical perspective, as it adds to the first-person gameplay introduced from Resident Evil 7. He has more believable emotions, such as his reaction to Elena's death.
Reach for me! God damn it! Why is everyone dying on me?
His fears are outlined throughout the game, but especially in House Beneviento as you delve deeper into his psyche.
Whoa, that's a kid?
Mia?
I didn't want to lose you again. I didn't want to destroy this family.
Mia, what are you talking about?
I love you both so much. I had to. I had to do it. Rose. It'll be fine. 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 It'll be fine.
His love for his daughter does shine through, and I liked how he rejected the choice of using his daughter as a weapon. Not only does this come into contrast with Resident Evil 7, because in that game you as the player can choose for Ethan, and this throws off any resolve Ethan might have had. In Village, this choice is taken away from the player and effectively gives Ethan a greater resolve and a definitive character.
You and me, Ethan. Together, we can go save Rose, and then we can use her to grind Miranda into paste.
My daughter is not a weapon. Fuck you!
Last chance. You don't want to find out what's in that hole.
I'll take my chances.
You're few.
Also, I do like how he retained his B-movie lines after he beats bosses.
I'm sick of bugs. And death as he was in life. Disgusting. Now stay down. Eat shit.
Certain unfinished plot points from the previous game, such as his ability to put his limbs back together and his hallucinations, now make more sense, as he was part of the mold network, which gave him regenerative powers and access to memories and thoughts of others who were part of that system. However, I think more could have been done. His personality mainly diminishes after Elena's death, and after that most of his lines are reactive. For most of the story, he thought he had lost Mia, yet he doesn't show much emotion to her parents' death. This could be because of the fact that he was focused on getting Rose for the most part, but some emotion to Mia dying, a character that was central to the events of Resident Evil 7, would have made sense to his character. Also, the fact that he doesn't really question how he can put his severed hand back together again, like Lego, is odd since he isn't privy to the fact that he's a walking, talking mold zombie. This would also put Chris and his team into question, as they should have taken blood samples after the event of Resident Evil 7 and had known something was possibly up with Ethan. They could have done a regular medical checkup, like you would in any situation that Ethan or Mia had gone through. Lady Dimitrescu figures something is odd by tasting his blood, and even Mother Miranda and Heisenberg knew something was up with him, so why wouldn't Chris's team have any suspicions? Mia's character was kind of a disappointment. I was hoping we got to see more, and what experimentations Mother Miranda was doing on her. It would have been good to be back in her shoes like we were in Resident Evil 7 and see what happened to her during her capture. We only get to see the real Mia at the end and in one flashback, and as a result her character development was left to the side. I'm hoping in DLC they will flesh her out a bit. I like playing as Chris. He was significantly stronger than Ethan, which is to be expected, and his role in the game is at first mysterious. He was marketed as a potential villain. Even the wallpaper for Village shows Chris's face, half shrouded with a wolf, hinting at some sort of transformation. Well, that doesn't happen, and here is where lies some of the issues. Chris's motivation to me seems a bit off. He doesn't tell Ethan in order to protect him. However, when he meets Ethan again in Moreau's reservoir, he is still refusing to tell Ethan the truth of the matter. I mean, Ethan basically has been through hell. Even Chris is surprised.
Ethan! I gotta say, I'm surprised you made it this far. It'd be a shame if something happened to you now.
Sure, Chris. Why not? You killed Mia. Now do me and finish the job.
Hey, you stay out of our business, Ethan.
What business?
God, watch out!
Regardless if Ethan knows the truth, he's gonna try to find his daughter, and Chris knows this. The game does acknowledge that this was a bad idea.
Don't move until I give the order.
I know it's too late now, but we really should have told Ethan the plan.
There wasn't time. And we didn't expect Miranda to act so soon.
Even so, you should have told him.
Yeah.
But to me, it seems like there was some sort of weakness in developing Chris's character, or perhaps wanting to show a villainous Chris seemed kind of like a cool idea. Overall, it's a contrived plot point. We know how Chris from the previous games has lost his comrades under his command, and because of this guilt he has gone down some dark paths. This guilt could have been the reason for why Chris doesn't want Ethan to get caught up in all of this. However, this isn't communicated very well. Also, Chris, knowing that Ethan survived the events of Resident Evil 7 and also getting special training, knows that Ethan can take care of himself. From what I could tell, most of Chris's team actually make it through the game, subverting what normally happens to his team. And while Ethan does die at the end, it was a decision made by Ethan himself rather than following Chris's orders. The ending does hint at a few ways where Chris's story can end up. We know Chris is going back to the BSSA headquarters to confront the use of bioweapons, which may come up as a DLC or in a future game. After the end credits, we also see a grown-up Rose who mentions Chris. If we take Ethan's last wish into account, Chris could become some sort of surrogate father or mentor to Rose, and this opens up a whole load of character development for him in the sequels to come.
Speaking of foolish questions, who or what are you?
Even I can't quite answer that.
This guy is mysterious and an all-round jolly character. It seems like the Duke does have some sort of connection to the other lords. You find some documents of Lady Dimitrescu noting meetings with the Duke, and he also guides Ethan throughout the game and saves him near the end. Also, shooting this guy does nothing. If anything, he taunts you for not being able to kill him.
Do be careful not to waste your ammunition.
What is notable is that he does have a house crest, just like the other lords. It's an owl, an animal that is wise but also sees everything. It sums up his character very well. I wish more could have been done to look further into his character a bit more. He's a mysterious one indeed. Some characters like Elena and Louisa were good for what screen time they had. Elena really showed the dread the average villager faced.
There! That's our way out.
Thank God. But what then? The village is still full of monsters. We can't fight them, there's too many.
Hey, don't talk like that. We'll find a safe house to put you in until I can find my daughter. My hunch is she's in that old castle.
No, that place is full of nothing but blood and death. And I don't want to be alone while you're...
And Leonardo and Lullian has shown the reluctance such villages would have to outsiders like Ethan. Louisa's part is short and I hoped it would have been bigger. It would have been interesting to see someone who is influential in her society deal with the Lycan attack and how her faith in Mother Miranda might have wavered if she found out the truth. She mentions her husband who went out to get help, and you get to see his fate near the place where you meet the first Verkalak. I liked this attention to detail, and I'm sure there were others that I have either forgotten or didn't notice. We all know the memes that surround Lady Dimitrescu. She was used in the marketing a lot, and well, it worked. Her castle is ripped straight out of Dracula, and her design is inspired directly from the Addams family, more specifically, Morticia Addams. Her 1960s inspired dress exudes with elegance, but also gives a ghostly-like feel, and its yellowish hue is possibly due to staining over time. Initially, the design team used a model of Mia from Resident Evil 7 and gave her a dress and a hat. She wasn't as large or scary as the team wanted, however, according to the art director, Tomonori Takano, they started to make the model larger, and that was the beginning of Lady Dimitrescu. Her size alone is why she's adorned by so many simps, but is also what made her domineering. Even though she was an early boss, whatever screen time she did have was great. You feel like an intruder in a castle, and well, she makes sure the feeling is mutual.
There you go. All this for a child who isn't even here.
What the hell do...
You ungrateful, selfish wretch! You come into my house! You lay your filthy man hands on my daughters! And now you even try to steal my property! How dare you!
Even though she isn't in the story for long, the game does well to define her character. For the most part, she does stay obedient to Mother Miranda, however, she does question some of her motives and even starts to disobey her when Ethan kills Daniela. Just like how she sees Miranda as her mother, she sees Daniela, Cassandra and Bella as daughters, and these motherly instincts kick in when one of them dies.
What have you done to my daughter? Mother Miranda, I regret to inform you that Ethan Winters has escaped that fool Heisenberg. Because he is in my castle and has already proven too much for my daughters to handle. When I find him... No, Mother Miranda. Yes, of course, I understand the importance of the ceremony. I won't let you down. To hell with the ceremony! That man will pay for what he's done. Cassandra, a word. What is that man up to? You're my daughter! Now act like it!
Of course, Mother.
Her rivalry with Heisenberg is big enough to outright make her question Mother Miranda, and as she is the oldest child, she has a superiority complex, which deludes her to think that she is a true successor to Mother Miranda. Overall, she has lost any humanity she once had, and this is shown on her use of villagers as experiments to make wine and moroica. Maggie Robertson, who voiced Lady Dimitrescu, won Performance of the Year award at the 2021 Game Awards, and is well deserved. The daughters, on the other hand, seem to be a little undercooked. They do have an interest in dialogue and you learn of their backstory. However, as I said before, visually they are hard to distinguish, and since we don't really interact with them, it's difficult to figure out which daughter we are fighting. Overall, you don't get to see much of Donna. You read about her and figure out that she may have suffered some sort of mental trauma after the passing of her parents. I think part of her personality comes out from her doll Angie. When she was a kid, she used to talk through Angie, and it seems like nothing has changed since she has gained her powers. However, her personality through Angie may have been distorted. Donna's own personality seems to be very timid, and she's using Angie to play out some other character. The design of Donna and her doll is also interesting. Donna wears a funeral garb that normally is worn when grieving the death of a loved one, while Angie wears a wedding dress. Does this represent the death of her character and the rebirth of Angie's? Or perhaps this is Donna not being able to move on, while Angie is the only thing in her life, willingly or forcefully married to in a sense. Honestly though, it's hard to say. You see her relationship with Angie as you traverse through the grand floor. You see 2 drunken teacups, a painting of both of them, and various sewing and knitting tools. The way Donna was able to manipulate Ethan's concerns for her daughter were terrifying. The abomination Ethan tries to escape from is a combination of the Mia doll mixed with the fears of Mia and Ethan had about the nature of Rose. The Beneviento symbol also hints at Donna's powers, as the moon possibly represents dreams or hallucinations, and it's also similar to Angie's face. Angie reminds me of films like Child's Play and Annabelle, where fear of dolls or pediophobia is invoked. Her design is similar to Annabelle, but she has the taunts of Chucky.
Don't leave. I can't let you. You're still alive, huh? Before my friends murder you! Tick-tock! Your life's son alive.
Wait!
Everything would be better if Rose wasn't born.
One design choice I did like was how after the hallucination wears off, you get to see Donna. The blood on her face mirrors that of a crack on a porcelain doll. Nice attention to detail. Moreau to me is a tragic character. He's this guy who doesn't seem that much more mentally developed than a child, and because he's unable to control his physical appearance, he becomes the most isolated one out of the Lords. As a result of this, he's the most loyal to Mother Miranda, in need of her support. You could see that him and Donna are very much attached to Mother Miranda, as during one of the scenes Donna and Moreau are placed more closer to Mother Miranda, with Lady Dimitrescu being further away and Heisenberg being the furthest, hinting at his eventual betrayal. The guy even has a mother tattoo, so if that doesn't show his infatuation for her, then nothing does.
Mother Miranda, if it's for you, I'd do anything. Not me, Mama! Next time. Mother
Moreau's inspiration has a drop of Lovecraftian work. Him being a merman from a dilapidated fishing village gave me vibes of Shadow over Innsmouth. His name most likely comes from the H.G. Wells book, The Island of Dr. Moreau. In that book, a mad scientist named Dr. Moreau makes human-animal hybrids, and the book itself delves into the moral implications of such practices and has spawned a few movies. The Moreau of Resident Evil Village also does similar things. He mixes both man and beast DNA, which led to the birth of the Varkalax, and he does many other things to please his mother. He has this childlike nature and is present throughout the game. He shows this intense jealousy for Ethan, as he thinks Ethan is Miranda's new favourite.
What are you talking about?
And at the moment of death, he calls out for Mother Miranda like a child would over a blister. If we looked at who was the most loyal to Miranda on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Moreau, Heisenberg would be 0. He reminds me of a child who resents his parents, a person who does so due to abuse and now wants revenge. He looks like Van Helsing from that Hugh Jackman movie, mixed with Captain Jack Sparrow. He shows this type of cruelty that is seen in the other lords, but is heightened further due to his Frankenstein-like experiments, where he mixes flesh with machine. A side note here, Resident Evil Village was sued by the director of a film called Frankenstein's Army. Many of the enemy characters from the game, such as Truman Soldat, seem to have taken quite a bit of inspiration from that film. If this is true, then Heisenberg being this crazy mad Frankenstein-like scientist would add to the various themes of gothic horror. He also uses Saw-style games, which Ethan got a taste of early on. This type of cruelty may come from the fact that he was subjected to similar abuse and now is doing it as an outlet.
Took us to be her children. She locked us away in the village. Decades of being forced to serve her. Can you even understand that humiliation? I'm not like Wesley. I want nothing more than to be free of that bitch. Though I need power. I need enough power to destroy her. These are the fruits of my power. The strong will destroy the weak. That's the way of the world. You should have never refused me, Ethan.
What a freak.
He isn't fond of the other lords, especially of Lady Dimitrescu, and this may be because he sees them as abused experiments, like himself, but experiments stricken with Stockholm Syndrome.
Heisenberg, the man's fate is in your hands.
Mother Miranda, I must protest. Heisenberg is but a child, and his devotion to you is questionable. Give the mortal to me, and I will ensure he is ready.
Shut your damn hole! And don't be a sore loser!
Now, child, adults are talking.
I'm the child. You're the one who's arguing with Miranda's decision.
You wouldn't know responsibility if it was welded
to
to
keep growing! One day your head might actually fit your ego! Lady, supersized bitch. Ugly ass psycho doll. An embryonic freak. Don't you get it? It's a test. To see if you're strong enough to be a part of Miranda's family.
I don't want to be a part of Miranda's family.
Neither did I, but here we are. And I'm next in line, right? Kill me, move up the chain. Well, fuck that!
I don't give a damn about your personal issues.
Miranda thinks we're nothing but children. Oh, she doesn't care for us. No. She's long lost all her humanity.
I don't give a shit about your family drama.
However, unlike other lords, his character isn't necessarily antagonistic to Ethan, offering him help near the end of the game as he knew him and Ethan had a common enemy. His sole reason for making an army was to rebel against his mother and free himself from her. You really see this desperation in his final moments.
This can't be the end for me! I must kill her!
Now, Mother Miranda is the odd villain of Resident Evil Village and the Resident Evil franchise as a whole. While I did like her on-screen presence and her relentless way of achieving her goals, we barely get to meet her. Yes, technically she is disguised as Mia from the beginning of the game and as the Hag. However, these personalities are more or less different to the point where it's hard for me to believe that Mother Miranda could act like a kooky old hag. Her being the Hag does make sense as it helped her understand what the villagers might think of her when she's not there, and this adds to her cunning nature. Her intellect also extends to her more scientific achievements, where she made significant inroads in researching what the mole network does and the creation of various experiments such as the Lycans, Keidu and her children. She was also involved with the shadowy group The Connections and helped make Evelyn, who was the main antagonist of Resident Evil 7. We also find out that she inspired Oswald E. Spencer, who went on to become the founder of the multinational company Umbrella. Both the company and the founder had their hands in many of the issues that plagued the zombie outbreak of Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3 and had far-reaching consequences throughout the whole franchise. So yeah, for a person who has extensive influence throughout the whole franchise, we barely get to meet her. Her impression of Mia wasn't exactly perfect, as she was deflecting many of Ethan's questions, so in hindsight, you could see something is off, and I did like that.
What is with the creepy story? She's only 6 months old.
Woman at the store said it was traditional. A local tale. Besides, Rose doesn't seem to mind.
Because she doesn't understand it. Thank God. We moved here so that she wouldn't have to deal with any of that, remember?
There's nothing wrong with my memory. You're just being paranoid.
It's not... Never mind. I'm sorry. But I'm not paranoid. I'm just cautious.
You really have to stop worrying.
It's just finding you in Louisiana, the pregnancy, Chris moving us here, military training, it all happened so fast, you know?
Well, at least we're all together. You, me, Rose. Now, everything's gonna
Seriously? Think we can just forget about what happened in Louisiana?
It happened so long ago. I don't understand why you are so... Our child. She's so important, isn't she?
She's everything to me.
And mine to me. With Heisenberg gone, you've lost your lead. What are you going to do?
I don't know, but I'm saving Rose.
You'd never know, do you? Even when I took Mia's place in your home. Poor Ethan.
Who are you? Where's Rose?
However, if you played the previous game, you also know that Mia isn't exactly a normal person herself. This, alongside the fact that we meet Mother Miranda near the end of the game, shows that the main focus was on the Lords more than it was on Mother Miranda. Most of her motivations and history are buried away in documents, and only in the last part of the game we really get to see her love for her child, and how she would go to any lengths to get her back.
I've waited so long. But dreams really can come true. Vessel or not, I can't wait to see my true child again.
Let go!
I've spent a lifetime creating this moment, and you try to take it away from me. I will take what is due. My desires will be fulfilled!
It would have been good if we got to see more of her and how she interacted with the villagers. Playing as Elena or Mia and seeing this through their eyes would have added to the whole lore of the game. There are a few themes throughout Village, As it is a direct sequel to Resident Evil 7, it shares many themes that game brought about. Family is such a strong theme that it would make Vin Diesel blush. This game has a cyclical nature by which it connects with the previous game.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
While Resident Evil 7 was a game based on patriarchy, as Jack was the dominant enemy from the beginning all the way to the middle of the game, in Resident Evil Village, it's all about matriarchy. Mother Miranda is the main villain, and the very first lord we encounter is Lady Dimitrescu, who is another matriarch of a castle dominated by women. Ethan is a central figure in both games, and while he is rescuing his wife in the first game, it is his daughter who is in danger in Village. The main and final villain of Resident Evil 7 is Evelyn, the DIY daughter made by the connections with the help of Mother Miranda. Just like Mother Miranda, she comes in the last part, and her wish was to insert herself into Ethan and Mia's life as a daughter. In Resident Evil Village, on the other hand, it's more about Mother Miranda forcing Rose into her own family. Obviously, this theme also extends to the various lords, each lord representing a type of child you would see in the real world, albeit without the powers. I have already spoken about each child, but two stand out the most, Donna and Moreau. Donna having lost her parents and attaching herself with dolls, while Moreau having a childlike demeanour around Mother Miranda. I always found it weird that even though Moreau can speak perfectly fine, the one time he is in front of Mother Miranda, he grunts and moans, signalling to her like a child would. Maybe that's his way to act all cute and get sympathy from Mother Miranda.
The more I can assure you, you entrust the more to House Dimitrescu. My daughters and I shall deliver them.
Way ugly! I want to see! He's away!
Don't you shut the fuck up!
As I have explained before, Heisenberg is more of a rebellious child, knowing that Miranda has no real love for her children. Lady Dimitrescu is the perfect daughter that Mother Miranda always wanted. She is generally obedient, strong, and has a good connection with the mold. Her only problem is a pre-existing porphyria, which requires her to drink blood to sustain her, and this is what makes her imperfect for Mother Miranda's plans. There is also the theme of specific genres. Resident Evil 7 is very much inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre and B-movie action tropes. While Village does have the latter, it introduces gothic horror. Horror of the past like Dracula, Frankenstein, with a bit of Lovecraft, doll films like Child's Play and Annabelle added to the mix. It's a Frankenstein monster of various themes. And this came about because the developers had intended to make a theme park of horror. The beautifully realized Castle Dimitrescu with its evil innards being a perfect reflection of the pseudo-vampires we meet. The mysterious Silent Hill-like level of House Beneviento, not knowing what is real and what might be a reflection of Ethan's insecurities. The grotesque, unethical and mutated horror of Moreau, a tale of what unethical practices can lead us to. And lastly, the more modern machine-like horror of Heisenberg's factory, whose experiments have forgone the human essence and have started to attack primarily on machine-like instinct. This mix of horror also extends to the gameplay itself, mixing aspects of Resident Evil 4 and 7, gameplay which has its action parts but also keeps the user on edge and always on the lookout. All these different levels make for a game which is very much a rollercoaster of emotions, survival gameplay, and story. Resident Evil is a franchise which I have grown up with and will continue to play for the coming future. It's a game which I think is one of the better Resident Evil games. I liked it over Resident Evil 7 and I think it holds the same standards as Resident Evil 2 Remake. Resident Evil 4 is still my favourite, with Remake 1 being a close second. Overall, I do think it does deliver on many of its promises and gives us a nice story about family, linking it with past games and teasing us what's to come in the future. Resident Evil Village is a game that accomplishes many things. It is able to weave a gameplay that is part action and survival, and like its predecessors, it does it convincingly with great bosses, a variety of enemies, beautiful locations, an intriguing narrative, and a rewarding point system that incentivizes continued replays. However, it has some stuff that it needs to work on, such as its character motivations, plot holes, and certain gameplay choices, which could have been implemented better. It delivers on its promise of a theme park of horror, and despite some of the problems I have laid out, the developers made a game that has many more highs than lows.